What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. Next in our chronological overview of all of the bingos that Bally has produced, from 1951 all the way up to 1980, it would have been 1974's Miss America 75. However, I have been over that in a previous episode. So the next game would be 1975's Mystic Gate. However, I've been over that one as well. So moving on, the next in line would be 1975's Miss Universe. Now I've been over that one in a previous episode. That was the 18-hole bingo that relied on multiple spotted numbers in order to make some pretty crazy combinations. So, next in the list would be 1976's Bull Market. Now, unfortunately, not a lot of information exists about Bull Market, except that it is a complete 100% remake of Bally's Blue Chip from 1974. According to bingo.cdyn.com, there is speculation that it might have been made for export only. But other than that, all the standard blue chip gameplay applies. The Backglass is exactly the same, just with the words Bull Market at the top instead of blue chip. You have the center spotted number that you can select via a dial on the front of the cab. Everything's the same. So we'll move on to 1976's Bonanza. Now, Bonanza is the last of the Magic Squares games. This game is a 40-coin max. That means that you can put in up to 40 coins per game, and that's it. Now, I'm not certain why they chose 40 coins as the max. I have to assume that this was some kind of regulation that they were getting around, because there were other 40 coin max games. So what do you get for your money? Well, in Bonanza's case, what you get, your first coin will reset the machine and give you your default odds, which are 3 in a row gives you 4 replays, 4 in a row gives you 12, and all 5 in a row gives you 80 replays. Additional coins, as they're fed, may advance your odds and give you up to 192 for 3 in a row, 384 for 4 in a row, and 640 for 5 in a row. Now there are 4 different colors of lines on the Backglass, and the lines which connect the numbers correspond to one of the colors of odds. So there are red, green, yellow, and blue. In Bonanza, these all advance independently. You don't have 2 colors that are tied together, so this is true quadruple deck scoring. The main feature on Bonanza is Magic Squares. As I mentioned, this was the last Magic Squares game that was produced, and in Bonanza they moved the squares back to the corners of the bingo card. For a long while, the squares were all adjacent to each other, clustered right in the center and top left of the bingo card. But in this case, you have one square of 4 numbers in each of the 4 corners, and then you have a magic line. The magic line moves 1 position up or down, and it's right in the center of the bingo card. Normally, you're locked out of these moving numbers features before shooting your 4th ball. However, this game has an extended time tree that you can earn through putting in more coins, which may switch to before shooting your 5th ball or after shooting your 5th ball. There are no rollovers on the playfield for Bonanza, and therefore there's no way in gameplay to increase your time tree. Instead, it has to be earned through coin play. The other feature that Bonanza gives you is all four corners score 100 or all four corners score 200. And this is pretty low compared to many other games which just give you whatever the 5 in the line is for any one color or your max odds. But considering that the max odds for this game are 640, 200 isn't bad. Now, it's worth noting that for Bonanza, Bally changed a lot of the internals. Many of the units are unique to this game, and most especially the Magic Squares /line unit is pretty close to unique to this game. The squares use a new design for the wipers, which tell it which position it's in. And this is more reminiscent of the semi-sealed discs used for the Magic Screen positions. These discs are a lot bigger than the previous discs, which is kind of interesting because they pack one additional mech in to the same space, but it is what it is. The other interesting thing is that rather than your traditional mixer, which has its own mixer motor, they have a thing called the program unit. The program unit handles a couple different things, mainly mixer-ish tasks. But one thing which I don't understand, and I've only perused the manual, I haven't really delved deep into it, there's a diode board. And so this would be one of the only semi-solid state 25-hole games. The diode board puts a diode on many of the coils, and I cannot fathom for the life of me, just looking at the manual, why. I would have to look at the schematic, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. There appears to be no other computer board which is doing anything, and there are only diodes on this diode board. And so all they're doing is preventing backflow of current, but again, I'm not sure why. Okay, dear listener, because I cannot resist a challenge, I took a look at the schematic for Bonanza, and I see that they're using these diodes really as protection for some of the coils from backflow from a bell. Now, if you listened to one of my interviews with Vic Camp, he talked about Bonanza, what a great game it was, and one of the things he mentioned was that there was a bell mounted inside, and I was pretty excited to hear that. I mean, it's pretty cool. The thing is that every time the game awards you something, much like many of the older games, there would be a knocker that went off. Well, in Bonanza, there's a bell that goes off, which is pretty neat. But what is kind of interesting is that this diode board is protecting, as I say, a bunch of coils. I'm not certain that it's strictly necessary for it to do so, but I'm sure that they wouldn't have included this diode board if it wasn't. That's just one of those things that's interesting to see. because it's unusual. I mean, it's not something that you see in really any other bingo that I've looked at to this point here. So instead of your traditional spotting disc, which is at the end of the mixer, they have something called the program disc, which I mentioned there's a program unit. That's what the program disc is mounted on. Well, this program disc, when it lands in various positions, will trigger through the diode board certain things to happen. For example, it will step your scores independently. It'll step them 1 step, 2 steps, or 3 steps, and it can do each color individually or all colors together, and all that is dependent upon what rivets it falls on the program disc and something called the scrambler unit disc. Now there are diodes mounted all everywhere in between these various positions. It's really intriguing to me that they did this, because I cannot fathom what the reason would be unless they were just completely out of space, which very well may be. If you take a look at some of the pictures of the inside of this game, you can see just how full this machine is of units. And there's really quite a bit in here. So getting back to the game, let's talk about the artwork. This game is one of a very few Western-themed bingos. On the Backglass you have a cowboy holding a lasso and riding a horse towards some charging bulls. Longhorn steer. And I suppose the idea is he's going to toss a lasso around one. I have no idea what his game plan is, but it's a very action-heavy Backglass. On one side of the bingo card, you've got the horse, whose nose is kind of poking into the Backglass bingo card area. And then on the other side, you've got one of the steer, and it's poking its nose into the bingo card area on the right. In between, you have the horns from one of the steer, with Bally's name printed right in the center. Beneath that, you have Bonanza. All 4 corners, A, B, C, and D, are encircled with a lasso to show you exactly what you have to move. Your letters A, B, C, D, and E have a horseshoe around them, just to fit in with the theme. And then above that you have a Conestoga wagon and what looks like an oxen or a steer that is driving it. Underneath A, B, C, D, and E, you have your odds. But above your odds and below your Magic Squares selection, you have these teaser lights. They're little arrows that are orange in a yellow circle. And as the machine spins, part of the animation that it does, and each bingo has a really cool animation. They're all different. And the lights will flash in a very specific pattern when you put in a coin. It gives you a little light show. Well, in this case, each of these lights will light in sequence. And then at the end, it'll either jump or not. And so these aren't true teasers in that it doesn't just stay at one position. At least that's how it looks from the paperwork. And I have not seen one of these in action. I've heard from multiple people that it's a very fun game, and so I'm kind of on the lookout for it. There was one here in the Richmond area that was selling for, I think, $60, somewhere in that range. I believe initially he wanted $100 for it, and he dropped his price before taking it off the market. Now, there is definitely a lot more than $60 worth of entertainment here. One thing to note is that there are no extra balls in this game. I suppose there was just no room for them. And especially with all these redesigned units, something had to go. That means that your games on Bonanza are going to be very quick. You're going to have 5 balls, and that's it. So moving on to the cabinet, Bonanza has a very impressive stencil. You've got a horseshoe on the side of the head with a star in the center, and above and below there are 2 lines with a water barrel, kind of a coffee pot, and in between a brand which says EZ. The lower cabinet is very attractive, and it is the skyline with buttes and mountains in the background and clouds with a red sky. On each of these mountains and buttes and outcroppings and what have you, there may or may not be a cactus. And each of the cacti is completely different. The cabinet only has one button. It's red. And that's because there are no extra balls. There's no yellow button. And then the Playfield kind of reprises the theme from the Backglass with the cowboy on one side and the steer on the other, but it extends it upwards so you can see a little more of what's happening in the environment. You've got cacti which are hanging out on either side, and then up at the top you have steer's horns and those 2 covered wagons up at the top. Above each hole you have a horseshoe, and each one has one of several different symbols in the center. Now I can't determine any specific pattern from those symbols, but it is neat nonetheless. Well, that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram, also at Bingo Podcast, or you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.